New York.
Apple.
Hot dogs.
Dollar.
Hollywood.
Democracy.
Freedom.
Rock and roll.
Wall Street.
Statue of Liberty.
Los Angeles, California.
McDonald's.
Jeans.
Bubblegum. Video games. Nintendo.
What's so great about America?
Every Saturday night, 7 to 9 p.m., explore American culture and language.
With Master Steve,
Elina MK,
And Hazva QT.
tune in to find out about what makes America so great.
The Great American Weekend. Listen exclusively on Radio Van 103.1.
Also, watch us on the Radio Von Facebook page, website, and mobile app.
Good evening, dear listeners of Radio Van. Today is a holiday, Citizens Day. So happy Citizens Day to everyone.
Happy Citizens Day to all you Armenian citizens.
Yeah.
And all you global citizens out there, because today we're going to be talking about the advantages and disadvantages of globalization. Well, we did that in sync. That was nice.
Yeah, it's always nice in sync. So we're here in our studio with Hazva QT,
Me.
Master Steve,
And Ina MK.
Good evening, guys. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm doing very citizenly today. Global and Armenian citizenly.
How is that?
Are you an Armenian citizen?
Not quite yet.
Okay. You're working on it.
Full disclaimer.
I like the word yet.
Yeah, I'm not quite yet. I have a 10-year special residency status that gives me kind of all the benefits of citizenship without the voting and all the protections of American citizenship without the possibility for to be protected.
Okay.
Be protected.
Yeah.
What were you doing for this past week? Share a little bit with the listeners before getting to our subject.
Personally, I spent the week at the studio of an artist, Felix Yeghazarian, whose art exhibit I'm organizing, and it was kind of it was an intense experience. He passed away 4 years ago, and being in that space was pretty intense, but very moving and very inspiring. You know?
Wait, so in what space?
An art studio.
In his studio.
Yeah, writing the content for the curatorial content for the exhibition. So it's pretty intense being in a living being inside of a space of a person who had has deceased. So this kind of space in between, that's the concept for the exhibition. So yeah, that's what I did this week.
Neat.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Neat.
Yeah, very inspiring actually. Kind of like a Steve Jobs effect, where knowing that one day you'll die is a way for you to really truly live. So that kind of feeling.
Keep death before you daily?
Yes. Yeah.
Memento mori.
I mean, when we breathe,
Remember death.
Memento mori. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you, Steve? What'd you do this week? Personal stuff.
Some global stuff.
I don't remember.
Let's bring
just
it
like
local
the whole,
before we go global.
This week is like every other week. I think it just kind of all blends together these days.
It sounds like a Pinky and the Brain reference, like the same thing we do every night, Pinky.
Yeah.
Try to take over the globe.
I
Try to
had an
globalize it.
intense week because we had all the arrangements for the video and audio recording of our Van Music Awards participants in our new studio. And with this, I would like to remind that pretty soon our show will be on from our new studio. So we're waiting for this day.
Yeah.
And now I would like to let our listeners know that later on during the show, we're going to host Elina Markaryan, Public Affairs and Communications Director of Coca-Cola Armenia. So stay tuned and listen, because we are going to discuss some interesting global issues here.
Yeah, we'll be having her on in order to discuss concepts about globalization, how Coca-Cola works within the framework of globalization as one of the largest companies around the world, the most ubiquitous, I would say, across all countries.
Well, I think it's still, year after year, is either at the top or in the top 5 of recognized global brands.
which is still being advertised always.
Oh yeah, well that's part of
always
that's part of the reason
Coca-Cola.
why everybody recognizes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most recognized brands
Yeah.
worldwide, Coca-Cola. You could take one square of one small part of the red and the white and recognize immediately it's them. They've done a pretty good job.
Yeah. Oh, they've done an incredible job. I mean, just the font that their logo is written in. You see that font, anything else written in that font, kind of, and you recognize it as, oh, that's Coca-Cola.
Something about Coca-Cola when I see it though, there's something that's like makes me like feel like it's like there's some kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, like something reminds me of like evil somehow. But you know, that's something to ask Elina about when we.
Okay.
when we
Yeah.
do
I mean,
it.
one of the things that I've been doing this week, which is different from other weeks, I've been doing my homework. So I've been browsing through this book, Globalization and Its Discontents, by the Nobel Prize winning economist Joseph Stiglitz. I think
Serious approach, as
So-
always, from
and,
Master Steve.
You know, he's calling out the good, the bad, and the ugly of globalization in here. The book is a little bit dated, but it still has some good ideas in it, some good debate.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, I always saw the ugly part of globalization being the kind of deterioration of the local entrepreneur, or the possibility for the mom and pop, like bookstores, like you know, the large supermarkets taking over the smaller ones, and we kind of see that happening in washes in here in Armenia, with smaller grocery stores being taken over by the larger ones next door, and got the Walmart effect in a way.
Well,
in
exactly. And
America.
that's not even necessarily globalization. I mean, the same thing is going on it becomes globalization when, say, Carrefour comes in, right?
Which they have.
Which, yeah, they have. But it happened even just locally, like nationwide, with big chain supermarkets like, Yerevan City and Sauce.
Are any of these organizations sponsors? Is Coca-Cola, Carrefour, or like Yerevan City or SAS sponsors of our show?
No.
Okay,
they
great. We
should-
can just say whatever we want then.
So he's just going to poo all over
Yeah,
on
we
him.
could just say whatever we want.
Oh.
Unless you want to give us money.
You guys better think about that.
Hence the that's globalization 1.0. Actually, I think it's the profit, like the buy and sell, the trade, the Silk Roads and the spice routes of globalization. That's something that interests me when I was researching, was globalization 1.0 being the kind of buying and selling of goods, globalization 2.0 being the expansion of organizations, and now in our like the last 15, 20 years, personal identities as becoming this third wave of globalization. So these three elements of globalization are kind of what intrigued me from what I was reading about this past week, was how we've gone from these larger nation state trading to smaller organizations, expanding to individuals kind of using social media and larger media outlets to become a global presence, let's say.
Well, yeah, technology has had a lot to do with how globalization has grown and morphed, really. I mean, when you think about it, for as long as there's been trade between different cities, right, different cultures, there's been some form of globalization. But now with technology, it's become really, really pervasive. I mean, technology that has changed communication, technology that has changed the ability to move money, to move capital at just the touch of a button, technology that has, made it possible to move goods.
Yeah. Blockchain technology, AI, automation, robotics. I feel like the next step would be universalization. Because with this AI and kind of being able to calculate everything into all of the information that we know about the physical world, we can now encapsulate that into these hard drives and supercomputers that can then be shipped off somewhere else.
And advertisement is an inseparable part of the globalization.
No, that's
Hashish,
that's just capitalism.
dollars.
Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend.
So then I tell the bartender, no, you keep the change.
Guys, I don't get it.
Ina, it's an American thing.
Learn more about American humor on Great American Weekend.
We're back in the studio. This jingle always makes me laugh. And also the one about the refrigerator. Yeah, we're back talking about globalization, and would like to remind that we later during the show will have a guest, Elina Markaryan, who is the Public Affairs and Communications Director of Coca-Cola in Armenia. So, guys?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
globalization, I mean, what do you think of when you hear that word?
That
Globalization.
we are the world. We are the children. I mean, according to my Google researches,
You're Googling.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to get a brief description of the word. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you do the Google description,
Yeah.
I want to ask your mind, what does globalization mean to you? Just like improv,
The first thing that comes to my mind is kind of negative, because I'm thinking, I don't know why this thing comes to my mind first of all, but it is like common culture, common everything for the entire world, and you kind of assimilation. A global assimilation, which means losing your own culture, your own something, which is really important. This is my
Interesting.
personal
Like a 1984.
and
Yeah,
very
well,
individual thing.
I mean, and that's one of the things too. Globalization is more than just economics.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's cultural, it's intellectual, it's
Educational.
ideas. You know, one of the benefits of globalization is the spread of the ideas of rule of law, civil society, democracy, those sorts of things, and of course,
democracy.
yeah, and those are things that have. What, do you think democracy is funny?
I
Here
just
he
think it's
comes
non-existent.
again.
I just think it's non-existent. I mean, like, there's the illusion of democracy.
The illusion.
Yeah, because media plays such a big role. I think that it's so easy to manipulate masses that...
Well, I mean, look, you have to set yourself a realistic standard. You know, pure democracy is not realistic.
Sure.
You know,
Direct democracy
is well, I mean, if you go back and look at
Echo democracy.
echo democracy,
The pure, the echo.
Let the trees decide. Let
man,
the trees decide.
that's
who's
another one of
president.
those terms like echo that is just
I know.
so misused these days. I think it's like auto.
I'm an
you know?
eco-democrat, and like I'm a recycling libertarian. So, huh? What's your political affiliation? Oh man, there goes my Russian accent. There you go.
How do you feel about
do you-
politics? Affiliation.
Affiliate.
That's not a real word, by the way.
By the way, yeah, not a real English word. Yeah, globalization for me is kind of it's similar in a way, but for me it's kind of like I was saying before, the kind of the imagined communities of the past for me, how I perceive them to be and how they've been told to me, are these small networks of people who have a different craft that support one another, whether they're a farmer or someone who's a tailor or a blacksmith or someone who's a carpenter, making things and creating this network within a small community that's local, supporting one another and creating this kind of harmonious way of living, both with the land and with the people that are living on the land. I feel like with globalization, there's such a quick, immediate trigger response for someone who wants something to go to Amazon. And I'm guilty of this too. You know, like, I want dark chocolate, you look it on Amazon, have it shipped to Armenia, and you know, I'm sorry, I curbed myself for the first time.
Freight forwarding. You can get, like anything here from anywhere.
You can
Yeah,
just
and
go
it's-
to the store, Adama.
and get it. That's a thing. So it's like there's this sense of immediacy, immediate gratification as part of globalization for me. There's a loss of that harmonious network of a local community supporting one another that comes with globalization. So that's my impression of it when I think about it on my own. Not looking
but
at
I mean,
definitions.
also you have to think about it. If why do you do that? Why do you go to Amazon to buy stuff?
Ease,
convenience, and
and
price a lot of times too.
Yes,
So it's
price,
with economies of
variety.
scale. With economies of scale, the more that's being done by one company, usually the better they can do in terms of price and the better they can do in terms of service. And so, you may not like the loss of the local when large companies come in. Like, I mean, in the U.S., and it's not really globalization. It's just large companies. Walmart comes in and closes down the local retailers that were owned and run by locals. Why does that work? Well, it works because they usually give better service and lower prices.
And with cheaper products from China that help to bring down those prices, which actually contributes to the concept of globalization, because you have this outsourced, really inexpensive source for products, and then this cheaper price locally that kind of obliterates the competition that might have to make the stuff themselves.
And we're ready for another advertisement break, which will be followed by Change the World by Eric Clapton. Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend.
Hey, what kind of fixins do you like on your hot dog?
Fixins?
Yeah, relish, onions, mustard, ketchup, condiments.
No, not that.
Oh, fixins. I love chili dogs.
Learn about American cuisine on the Great American Weekend. Welcome back.
Welcome back to our studio. We are running around because our guests are already here with some goodies for us.
Yes, we have some soft drinks and water and other goodies that are gifts to us.
And we were having a chat with them already, but soon after 8 we're gonna talk with them on air right here in the studio Radio Van. So are we ready?
First,
but first,
Ina, you always have the quotes.
Yeah. As
Lay them
always,
on us.
we don't break the traditions here. So here we go. Quotes about globalization. Globalization means we have to re-examine some of our ideas and look at ideas from other countries, from other cultures, and open ourselves to them. And that's not comfortable for the average person. Herbie Hancock.
Herbie Hancock, the great jazz man.
Herbie.
So, and I mean, the average person doesn't necessarily like to challenge themselves and change their habits, get out of their, comfort zone, the area that they feel comfortable in. And globalization in all sorts of different ways, forces you to get out of your comfort zone and change things. I mean, traveling, the internet, information, running across information, or having information kind of forced on you that you don't like.
Chain supermarkets instead of small grocery stores.
Well, yeah. But again, I mean, that's the sort of thing. They offer a benefit, lower prices.
Yeah, of course. But usually changes first people take negatively. They think, oh, I'm used to this stuff and now it's gone. What am I going to do? And it takes time to get used to it.
Well, and I think I really think it's kind of a human thing, like a human trait to not necessarily like change.
Let's go to our next one. While globalization will make the world smaller and more accessible, we must continue to appreciate its vibrant diversity. Jean-Philippe Courtois. Yeah?
Vibrant diversity. I guess that speaks to the appreciation of the local, because there's a quality to, there's this concept this other quote that I've heard that says think global, act local. So
That's a good one.
There's a globalization as a mindset to kind of perceive your actions where you are in terms of being a global citizen, but to be present inside of your local community, which I think is really important because it accepts you as a global citizen on Citizens Day again, and not as as someone that might be just ready to buy something from the mass market, mass made something to support the local craftsman or the local farmer, or the local person that might not have access to large scale systems that usually globalized organizations are working within, the framework that they're working within. So that's kind of what I get from that quote.
Yeah, appreciating what you have, but still knowing that you have the access to a bigger world.
Yeah, more like appreciating the local person that makes stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Simply.
Okay, next one. People have accused me of being in favor of globalization. This is equivalent to accusing me of being in favor of the sun rising in the morning. Claire Short.
So how inevitable is globalization?
Yeah.
I mean, and we look at it that way. We look at it as being inevitable because, and I think globalization is tied up also with the idea of progress.
True.
You know, progress in terms of becoming
Technical.
more efficient, becoming, technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, technology has a lot to do with becoming more efficient. So things become less expensive, more prevalent. You can find more things at a lower price. You have easier access, convenience. As long as we're thinking in terms of progress, and in terms of progress being defined in part by, availability and convenience and price, lower prices. Yeah, it does seem like globalization is inevitable, but really, is it?
Is it?
We always thought, just think about, we view the future in terms of where we are now and where we think we're headed and our ideas of what we want in the future. But look back at, say, the Roman Empire, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody in the Roman Empire really thought or hoped or predicted that the Middle Ages were going to happen. When the Roman Empire dissolved and Europe was just kind of left in pieces. So globalization might be inevitable if we keep pushing these ideas of progress that are related to efficiency and convenience and
lower
prices.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that I was just asking myself what supermarket do I go to most, and for me it's the closest one, which is my local supermarket, and
which is again about convenience.
It's convenient because it's 24-hour, and down the street I get my fruits and vegetables. That's not one of the big supermarkets because there's three. There's three major ones: Nordzov, Yerevan City. They're the local big chain supermarkets in SAS. So if I can get what I can get from the local stores, I go there because I know that it supports those who are potentially underserved, as opposed to those who have this large, vast monetary system and network that is kind of like a large-scale machine that might not be providing for the average mom and pop store or the average Joe, even though the average Joe might be working in that organization, and because they're working for profit, and like you said, technology serving to bring in efficiencies, I feel like by supporting the local community, that's acting more like a global citizen than perhaps going to like a large-scale Carrefour, even though they have awesome stuff. Oh, wait.
Yeah, they do.
Well, yeah, they have awesome. They have awesome stuff. They have stuff that you
couldn't
get here. I mean, I remember when I first moved here in 2001, there was so much stuff that you couldn't get here.
Yeah, it's true.
That I was used to having in the U.S. And now, and this is both good and bad.
Tabasco sauce.
Yeah, Tabasco sauce, peanut butter, breakfast cereals.
Yes.
I think my cholesterol went way up when I first moved here because I was having eggs for breakfast almost every single day.
We can discuss that with Aramas, right? With the keto diet thing. Cholesterol, does that really happen?
Cholesterol? Wait, what?
But I mean, both the good and the bad of Armenia, Yerevan, becoming more globalized and more cosmopolitan. I mean, there are things that I recognize here from anywhere I've been in the world. One of the ones that isn't here yet is McDonald's. Right?
Yeah, but a lot
and
of
that's
people
one of those,
wait for
that's
that.
one of those things, you know. McDonald's, they're like everywhere. When McDonald's comes here, I'm thinking maybe it's time for me to move.
Oh God, please! I don't even want to like speak those words because then they manifest into reality. So, look, consider you guys, just everyone, all the listeners, you're men in black. Boom! You just forgot all the words that we just said.
Yeah.
Hey, and welcome to the Great American Weekend. We're talking about globalization here.
And we love
the Great
choravat,
American
kebab,
Weekend, take 2.
Yeah,
and no fast food. And also, I used to order because I really love making pancakes, and I loved the maple syrup back in the U.S. So I used to ask my host parents or my friends living in the U.S. to send me some maple syrup. But now you can find it here.
Yeah, now you can find it here. And I used to have a hard time making pancakes when I was first here because I couldn't find baking soda.
Yeah, true.
I had the hardest time finding baking soda. And it was around. I mean, obviously it had to be around because people were making cupcakes and cakes and you need it. But I couldn't just go to the grocery store and buy it. You know,
Yeah,
and so
right.
I make pancakes from scratch because I can find all this stuff. So yeah, there are little things like that, the positives of globalization. But I think it has a lot. I mean, you really have to look at it and say all of these things are available.
Is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, choice.
Yeah.
Choice is a good thing. Having options is I don't know how many people in the modern world today would say that having choice is bad, unless you have so much choice that it paralyzes you and you just can't decide.
That's
and that
about
happens
me
sometimes.
because I'm a Libra.
You just get paralyzed because there are too many options. That's bad. But
me.
I mean, having more options, but then when you have more options, you know, there's the responsibility, the personal responsibility to think about those options and think about the consequences of them and think about if I do this, then what happens? So, yeah. More quotes.
Who
Yeah,
stops
the
to think though? Who stops to think though?
The last quote for
That's
today.
okay.
Diversification and globalization are the keys to the future. Fujio Mitarai. Yeah, I wonder if I pronounce this right. Fujio Mitarai.
And that I like that quote because I mean he doesn't really mean it this way. I don't think, you know, diversification and globalization are the keys to the future. But I think a lot of people when they think of globalization, they don't think necessarily of diversification because they think of globalization as the big giant companies or corporations coming in and erasing the local
swallowing
and
everything.
swallowing it all up. And that does happen, you know, but again, we are not powerless to fight against that. I mean, it's individuals and their choices that make that happen.
Corporations are people too, according to the United States.
According to American law, yes, corporations do have a lot
And
of
they
the
have
legal
They're comprised of
qualities of being a legal individual, yeah. And there are benefits to having it that way. And actually, there are some reasons that that's actually necessary as well.
You know, it's interesting when you say the one of the major impressions of globalization is that the corporations will take over all the local markets or the kind of obliterate, like Barnes & Noble kind of was at risk of taking away the bookstore until the local bookstores kind of
were
like
completely decimated by
Amazon. Yeah. And so
and then Amazon goes from being just a bookseller to selling everything. You can get anything on Amazon. Now. If it's legal, you can buy it on Amazon.
So I think unless now this really interesting question of who stops and thinks, because unless we actually stop and think how we consume, what products we purchase, and where we get them from, until we actually take a moment to really think, who am I supporting with this purchase, and how does it serve what community? Because you can serve, let's say, the the community of Walmart by purchasing something, or Amazon, or you can serve the community of I don't know, what's the local fruit vendor, Noor, which is local independent franchises of fruits and vegetables. So it really comes down to the personal choices we make during the time, that moment at the market when we're choosing what to purchase.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, we've got Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations right over there, and I've read maybe a third of this book, but it's, this is the founding text for capitalism, right? And so to a certain extent,
Wealth of Nations.
Yeah, the Wealth of Nations. And what I always love to point out is that Adam Smith was not an economist. The term economist didn't exist back then. Right? So it's not like he went to school and studied economics and then wrote The Wealth of Nations. No, he was a philosopher. And he wasn't just any sort of philosopher. He was a moral philosopher. And his first book was called On the Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it's a much shorter book. And I've read much more of that than I have of Wealth of Nations. But the idea that what Adam Smith is talking about in The Wealth of Nations is this the idea of people acting in their own self-interest, right, can be good for other people and for society in general. So I'm not necessarily doing things economically that I think are good for others. I'm doing things that I think are good for me. And that can benefit everyone else. But what people tend to forget is that Adam Smith wasn't talking about a person who is just narrowly focused on money, right? Adam Smith's human being is a person who, and this comes out of his first book, Theory of Moral Sentiments, is a person who has compassion and sympathy and has connections to their family and to their community. The great American economist, another Nobel Prize winner, Milton Friedman, has a quote in one of his books, Free to Choose, that says, it's something roughly like, we have taken self-interest to be very narrowly defined. And we've become myopic, like short-sighted, in the way that we think about economics. He said, self-interest also involves many other things that, like your feelings towards your family, like your feelings towards your community. Anybody who acts on a day-to-day basis purely by thinking about numbers, about money, and not thinking about their own other wider interests, family, friends, hobbies, art, whatever, I think Adam Smith wouldn't really define them as a human being.
Just like in The Little Prince, there was a planet with a guy who was counting and counting and counting the whole day and not thinking about anything else.
I think Adam Smith would say this is not really a human being. This is like some sort of just number crunching animal. They're not fully human. And so when we talk about globalization and we talk about capitalism as well, I think it's really important to remember that the individual has a place in that. And the individual, not just as somebody who's worried about money, but who's worried about other things, about having a full life.
There's an inherent, it's an interesting concept because this machine being comprised of human beings, and the individual decision making that is what plays a major part and role of how that machine works. There's a behavioral economist by the name of Dan Ariely who speaks about the phenomenon of irrationality and this fallacy that is inherent inside of modern economics, where the assumption is that human beings are rational human beings, that they're making decisions.
Rational choice theory. Which fits in with Smith and capitalism.
And so what he studied is irrationality and how human beings actually are not rational. They make decisions completely based off of how you mentioned the family network, the community network. If someone feels like they're part of my own community,
but how is that irrational?
Well, here it's the irrationality comes into play with this concept of a human being considering themselves to be an honest human being, So he asked this question inside of a talk called Dishonesty. It's a documentary, and he's at MIT and he's giving a talk in front of a bunch of people. And so Dan Ariely asked the audience, he says, how many of you consider yourselves to be honest human being? And everyone raised their hand. Now, how many of you have said a lie within this past year? And everyone raised their hand and laughs, because there is this disconnect between how we perceive ourselves and how we actually are. And so the irrationality is inherent in that, because all the communities that we are a part of, all the organizations that we are part of, have this element of how we perceive ourselves to be and how we actually are. And so this irrationality is what fits into all the decision making that happens at the market, happens at the online, happens in Amazon, happens wherever. Even when you're a CEO of an organization.
Yeah, but I think that those two questions are framed in a very unfair way. I mean, you consider yourself an honest person, which means that you never tell a lie?
And,
I mean, that's not...
And I have to be honest with you guys, because I hate to interrupt you. But this is the truth. The advertisement break is coming, and followed by a song.
We're still very capitalist.
The Man Who Sold the World by Nirvana.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect segue.
Great David Bowie cover by Nirvana.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
The Great American Weekend with its globalization theme. Stay tuned.
Oh, say, can you see?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
Adamast, what are you doing?
He's trying not to forget where he came from.
We're back, and we haven't forgotten where we came from. We just came from a photo session with our guest.
Although, as Mos Def says, it's not where you're from, it's where you're at,
Yeah.
which speaks to the globalization and localization.
It's not where you're from, it's where you're going.
Oh.
And I'd like to mention Irene's comment, because we have some comments at our video, and one of them is by our dear listener Irene Arakelan. Hello, Irene.
A regular.
Yeah,
here
thanks for being
with
with
the
us
Great American
again,
Weekend.
over and over again. So she says globalization is a real danger for small nations to keep their culture, which is the fundament of their existence. So thank you for your comment. And she also says that this is one of her favorite songs.
The Man Who Sold the World. Yeah. Well, and we also have another comment here from Sergei Khachaturian about the Mueller report.
Mueller.
Yeah.
Which we've been, we were having updates about that for a while, and we were going to talk about it last
global
week.
theme.
Yeah. An overarching theme. It's something that we can't get away from. We can't escape this whole Russian collusion thing. Can we?
I think the Russian government has found a way to brand themselves globally as being pervasive in American politics, such that the impression is that they have some sway over the usage of Facebook marketing and manipulating the masses through divisive information. And I recently saw a graphic actually by Business Insider that showed the connections between Democrats and Republicans over time, over the past 50 years. And it was this animated graphic that showed how together Democrats and Republicans were on issues in the 50s and 60s, despite their differences, and how it's completely divided across party lines now. So,
oh yeah, the polarization and the divisiveness of American politics right now, and debate, and to a certain extent, society in general in the U.S. is, I mean, I can't say at an all-time high because I don't really have a metric to judge that against, but it's much worse than I've ever noticed it in my lifetime. But the Mueller report, so a month and a half ago, it was handed over from Mueller to the Attorney General, and he did a 4-page little summary of it that he put out and promised to release the whole thing with some redactions. And the redactions, to a certain extent, are legally necessary in order to keep from putting into public domain certain information about ongoing investigations and procedures and stuff of regarding grand jury testimony and stuff like that. So the fact that it had to be redacted was almost a legal necessity. And so Barr, the Attorney General, did that and released the almost 400-page document with about 10% of it blacked out. And there's been some controversy about what was blacked out. And I suppose some stuff had to be just now how he decided to and what he decided to edit out, to strike out and not let everybody see, I guess history will have to judge that, or that'll have to be judged once we actually see the entire report that's unredacted, unedited. But what's going on is, what's your understanding, Hazva, about what the report said?
My understanding of the report was that it said Mueller basically recommended that Congress take steps in order to investigate further based upon the 300 and some odd page report that he submitted, and it was to be continued from my perspective, as in his Robert Mueller's recommendation was that the investigations go to their individual and respective courts and or committees for further questioning and further investigation. But from what was said in terms of the spin from the president was an immediate response that was kind of completely absolving himself from any culpability or responsibility whatsoever, which is kind of a mode of operation for him, considering all the lawsuits he's had to go through with a lot of his construction projects and a lot of his bankruptcy cases. So
that's his MO. His MO is to always be black and white about everything. And MO is short for modus operandi, which is Latin for way of operating. So his standard operating procedure, right, is to spin something either completely white or completely black, completely good or completely bad, and just throw it out there. And then he also doesn't necessarily feel the need to stand by that later on. That's what I said then. This is what I'm saying now. I changed my mind. Which is very odd. It is for really a politician.
For a president. It's not just a politician. We're talking about the president of the United States.
Yeah, well, and he's not a politician. He's never really been a politician. Now he is the president. We're in uncharted territory.
I'm sorry.
Here.
I'll have to add something to that. He's kind of been an asshole. Like a real real estate builder. A real real estate construction, real jerk.
Hazva QT has just called the president of the United States a real asshole, and now we're going to move away from that.
And that won't change.
And now we're going to close the show for, I don't know. We are postponing the Great American Weekend.
No, we're not. This is their wild card.
Yeah, that's part of America. We can criticize the president.
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech. It makes you feel so good.
He's but what did you have to add?
Some local news.
No, but the Mueller report, I think the whole thing is really being blown out of proportion. I didn't read the full redacted report. It's 400 pages. I got through maybe 40 or 50, and I didn't see as much controversy there as the media has made it out to be. I looked at some of the quotes that the media had been talking about and didn't see them to be as loaded. It said that there was no collusion, but then the line on collusion kind of changed. Oh, well, he didn't organize with the Russians to help change the outcome of the election, but he knew that their involvement in it would help him. So that's bad too. And I'm like, it seems like the line just keeps moving.
Yeah. Yes.
And this is the and then obstruction of justice, which is, there were two big ideas with this, the collusion and the obstruction of justice. And the obstruction of justice, Mueller said, well, I'm not going to bring charges. I don't think that there's a case to be won here, which doesn't mean that there isn't evidence. It just means that he wasn't quite sure that a case could be won. Now, in court,
Is that what he said?
doesn't mean... That's kind of the feeling that I got.
I don't think that's what he said. I think he said that this is something that Congress needed to continue on their own based upon his recommendation. It wasn't
Yes, but I mean, not for criminal, because Congress can't do a criminal thing. And the bar for criminal, a criminal case would be to find him guilty in front of a jury of 12 ordinary citizens.
There's an
what-
inherent FBI policy that I have to interject with, because there's an FBI policy that's been in place.
No, that's not
since
FBI. That's the Department of Justice.
Department of Justice policy that has been in place for the past 50 years that is consistent in not trying a sitting president, because
Not indicting, not bringing charges against a sitting president.
because of how it will impede his ability to govern the state. And so in this case they might not be doing that specifically because this is a sitting president that might have some information that
And
could
that's
be trying.
something I don't quite get, because a big chunk of what I read of the report seemed to me it was Mueller basically going and fighting against that assumption and saying, look, if there is, I mean, in this case, that doesn't necessarily apply because bringing an obstruction of justice case against him doesn't impede on his ability to rule. What it does is it holds him accountable under the law and keeps him from abusing his power as president. And so the big chunk of what I read actually seemed to me to be Mueller's argument against that, even though the press seems to have said that he just assumed that and didn't question it. But I read a lot in there where he was actually questioning that policy and saying it doesn't necessarily apply here. And then after all of that, he still said, there really isn't a case that could be, I don't feel like there's a case that could be won in court here. It's not clear. He did some obviously distasteful things, but whether or not that could be. Hold on, but whether or not that's something else. But whether or not those distasteful things could be used to find him guilty in a court of law, that's another thing. Sure. And I don't think Mueller thought that there was enough proof there to bring the case and to win it. Possibly. But that leaves it open because an impeachment trial in the Senate doesn't have that kind of restriction on it. It's not a formally legal trial. It's kind of a beast of its own. And so it seems to me he left open impeachment if the Senate, first Congress would have to vote to start the impeachment, and then the Senate would have to have a trial and then find him guilty of like high crimes and whatever against the state. And obstruction of justice could be seen as abuse of power and then upsetting the balance of power in the U.S. government. So that could be a crime against the state. I think the legal matter in terms of a regular court of justice was kind of settled by Mueller saying, look, I don't think we could win this case, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't still be impeached, because a regular obstruction of justice charge by a regular person is not something that's going to affect the function of the government on the grand scale. But obstruction of justice by the president could affect the government on a grand scale because it would be an abuse of power.
I thought that people in love cannot keep track of time, but you guys, when it comes to politics, you guys lose.
Oh, Sergey, was that enough? You dragged us down a rabbit hole.
We hope that our listener Sergey is satisfied. Now we're going on a short break, and we'll come back with some more local news.
I would never live in America.
Why not? Didn't you enjoy your time there?
Yeah, why not?
It was good, but it wasn't great.
Because you didn't know us when you were there.
Wait a second. Aren't we supposed
Join
to have...
Elina MK, Master Steve, and Hazva QT for a great American experience.
Every Saturday on the Great American Weekend.
Yes, So we're back with some more news. We still have 45 minutes to go. No,
Yeah, something like that.
bad math.
45 minutes.
45 minutes.
Math
Yeah,
and
yeah,
me.
yeah, that's-
Math and me. No.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. 45 minutes.
Keep the numbers away from me.
And we are anxious to welcome our guests.
But first,
really
we've got to
soon.
do some local news, right?
Yes, one or two.
One or two.
Yeah.
Start.
Okay.
The faster you talk, the more you can get through.
Before I get to the news, I would like to remind that today is the Citizen Day for all Armenians. So if you guys are outside somewhere and you can join the Freedom Square concert followed by fireworks, do so because...
Yeah, I was out there earlier today listening to some of the bands practice, getting ready for the show tonight. Very good stuff.
Oh, and if Steven says... very good stuff. That is good stuff.
Every time you guys,
As if I have good taste
I
in
feel like
music.
I want to say like yay, like I feel like I'm a kid every time you guys do like the local news stuff. It's like yay, like it makes me feel like I'm a kid again.
Okay, no
This is
more
great.
Mueller. Okay, so some medical news I've got here. First ever liver transplantation with a living donor has been performed in Armenia. Minister of Health Arsen Torosyan announced.
Nice.
He said the surgery has been performed at Astrik Medical Center in Yerevan with assistance of Russian doctors. The patient and donor were a 56-year-old mother and her daughter, respectively.
Cool.
Torosyan unveiled the ministry's plans to further develop the surgery type in Armenia, adding state funds are set to be allocated in 2020 for liver and kidney transplantation in the country. According to the minister, a liver transplant costs around $100,000.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's.
So this is good news.
Yeah. And that's so it's right now. I think a liver transplant is actually one of the easiest transplants to do. Not to dismiss this at all. It's still an amazing, incredible thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just like, it's just a
great
liver.
Well, what do you celebrate? It's like
No, I mean, it's an amazing thing, and it's a great place to start. But I think part of the reason, from what I've heard, there's really kind of no laws or odd laws on the books here about donating and donor organs. And so you have to like voluntarily do it, which I think is why they're starting out with kidneys and livers.
Black
because you
market
can actually
opportunity.
live. I mean, you only need like a third of your liver to survive. So you can donate a third of your liver to somebody else and still live.
So if
living
you need
donors,
liver, let me know.
and kidneys, you can live with just one. So you can donate a kidney to somebody who needs one, and you can survive with one.
I wonder what the going rate for a kidney or a liver is, and what the black market cost for it would be. I feel like there's a weakness in the market
my
here.
impression is that because of sort of black market fears and stuff like that, and some really crazy stuff that happened in Russia a decade or two ago, that's why I think the laws here in Armenia are just like no donors. It's just very, very strict and almost
No organ
impossible.
donor. Wow.
I mean, very.
No donors, no kidneys, no time for another news. We're here in the ready for a break and getting ready
We'll
to
be back
welcome
after the break
our
with our
guest. Yes, stay tuned. It's gonna be really interesting here.
Ina, what would make America great again?
More barbecue.
No, we need more freedom. That's what'll make it great.
Join us on Great American Weekend.
And help us solve all of America's problems.
Every show is recorded by the NSA and sent to the White House.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend. We are here with our guest, and I think, Ina, you've got the first question.
I want to introduce once again our guest, Elina Markaryan, Public Affairs and Communications Director of Coca-Cola Hellenic Armenia. And the first question that comes to my mind, why Hellenic?
Hello, guys, first of all, and thank you very much for hosting me here.
It's our
Hellenic,
pleasure.
Basically, it started with the Greek capital, and the capital has Greek roots. That's why Hellenic, it's simple. And we had also a very good relationship with Greeks and that's why Hellenic bottling. So the one of the earliest operations that were opened, they opened in 1996. So the location was Armenia.
Oh, okay.
Now we know.
Interesting. Yeah.
Starting to get educated. And another question will be, what's the best thing about your work in this big company?
Oh, constant learning and a lot of challenges every day. I love it. And it's a lot of work with people. And it's a lot of work for doing really very good. Because the part also of my portfolio relates to corporate social responsibility. And this is really what I'm proud of.
What do you mean by corporate social responsibility?
There are a lot of global projects and strategies that company globally implements. For example, in 2019 at Davos Forum, our global CEO James Quincy announced that Coca-Cola committed as one of the strategies of World Without Waste to recycle all the bottles that Coca-Cola puts in the market. So in a way also bottle-to-bottle recycling, because the reuse also of the material is the key in terms of assuring the sustainability and to have a responsible business, to have a cleaner environment, and to have a better future for us and for our children.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So, and I guess that kind of answers, at least partially, one of the questions that I wanted to ask. You know, the idea that we've got this huge American company, and you would know better, and I forget, but Coca-Cola is one of the most recognizable brands in the world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this big mega corporation coming into this smaller country like Armenia, and you know, devastating maybe local competition, or I mean, there's a lot of criticism that can be leveled against these mega international corporations coming into these smaller markets. But what are the benefits? And I guess one of them is, you had just talked about the recycling initiative.
Not only, I mean, I'll mention a lot, like we do a lot of, youth empowerment. So it's a huge project that we started last year. So it's basically development and empowering of youth and training them in life skills and business skills. So we trained physically 2,100 youth last year. We are going to continue these trainings this year as well. So the target is 2,500. So why business skills maybe and why life skills? That's going to be, another question. Is that because there was a certain statistics that we did global, and then we understood that youth from 18 to 30 years old, most of this is the youth disadvantage in terms of lacking, enough employment opportunities, or they do whatever they want, but they're unhappy, or they really, graduates from universities, but unfortunately they don't know how to find their employer. They don't know like simple things. You will be really kind of surprised. They don't know how to develop a CV, how to go to the interview, how to prepare for the interview. That's the one part of the life skills. And, we have a lot of good case studies that people found employment after that. And in terms of the business skills, of course, it's a lot of practical knowledge we can, instill in the generation. And let alone that all our management team and the employees and also other business partners that we work with, we all mentored during all these courses.
Okay, so, I mean, let's make this assumption, which I don't necessarily believe it, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here. The assumption that all that these big corporations are concerned with is their bottom line, is their profit. How does doing something like that help Coca-Cola if all they're thinking about is their bottom line?
Okay, so there is a philosophy. First of all, let me actually go back to figures maybe, because we have a very good proof point in terms of an independent study conducted by KPMG, which is socioeconomic impact study that evaluates the overall social, economic, and environmental impact of the company. And this kind of study is developed and usually is happening all around the world. So that's the first time that Armenia has it. And we proudly announced that, for example, during the period of 2015 and 17, the only investment that we have direct investment, it was 23 billion. So in terms of the last 23 years, so we have 29 million of direct investments. For community projects, what we have here in terms of investments, 112 million AMD. That goes right to the community investment in the last 3 years. And globally, we committed to invest 2% of our revenue into community. Why community? Because we truly believe that the better the community, the wealthier and happier is the community, the better also the business. So we really want to bring happiness, and we really want to unite people over a good cause. Because the brand itself, it creates a very happy moment for people. And for us, very important.
I had a question about a lot of companies, a lot of global brands worldwide contribute their funds and profits they make in order to help their image be more palatable to the larger masses, like Philip Morris doing anti-smoking campaigns, which still supports people going out and buying Philip Morris products. Then similarly with Coca-Cola, doing these local campaigns is kind of a way to create an image. And there are real concerns in terms of how when Coca-Cola moves into, let's say, a community, there is a risk for the water resources of certain communities, like a specific place in Kaladera in Rajasthan in India, where after moving into the local village, the water supply went down 10 meters. So there's an economic, an ecological concern with regards to large-scale globalized corporations such as Coca-Cola. And then on the hand, there's health concerns, because what you're basically selling is sugar, glucose, and high fructose usually, which is a poison to the body, because it spikes the blood sugar to such a level that it raises the percentage of type 2 diabetes risk by 26% if someone drinks 1 can of Coca-Cola a day. So I'm curious to ask, as a public image and affairs officer, how do you address these specific ecological and health concerns with regards to your product and what it offers to society actually?
Thank you for the question. It's very interesting, and I'll be happy to cover it. First part, we talk about ecological. So globally, we have a commitment to replenish water, 100% of water that we take, because as you said, our product is water itself. So 98% of our product is water. So what we do globally, in every market we operate, we replenish the water. In Armenia.
How?
In Armenia, I'll give you one of the examples. For example, we cooperate with USAID in the last, let's say, 4 years. So the project, for example, basically started in Ararat Valley. What we did, there were like fisheries that were like pouring water, and then, from fishery, and then the adjacent community were not able even to irrigate their lands, to use their resources to provide living for their families, you name it. So what we did with the cooperation with USAID, we developed this, in a way we renovated this very old water pipe from Soviet times that they had it. And then with this pipe, we managed to take the water from fisheries that were just, kind of pouring into the soil and it was useless, to the adjacent community. 40 hectares of water, hectares of the soil were irrigated, and people, 2,000, people living in the community, still living in the community. And even they send us, very good apricots, very tasty apricots, saying thank you. And moreover, that was the bordering community. Strategically and politically, it was very important to make the life of these people, possible in terms of, providing, living for their families. In terms of the fisheries, there was also a water monitoring system that was put on the fisheries in terms of how much water, fisheries use. Because they used water, nobody knew how much they used. And there was a special server that was bought for the Ministry of Environmental Protection. So they can now monitor the water, and the fisheries For example, how much water they use, because this is also goes back into how much they also pay into the state budget in terms of water, and also the responsibility for water management.
Do you plant trees? Because as to preserve water inside the soil, trees are needed in order for the aquifers
we do. It's the part of also sustainability actions, and we do it couple of times, and we are in the tree planting, so we're also very active. We don't plant everywhere, but there are certain projects with our sustainability manager that all also employees are encouraged to go for the tree planting. And not only that, there are also projects that are aimed at educating people. Last year, we started 3 years project with, again, USAID implementing by Urban Foundation. And here we also work on raising awareness on efficient water management. Because especially in Armenia, this is the key. People think that the water is everywhere. You just, open the water and then even you can drink the water and you can use as much as you want. But
what about the health risks? Sorry to interrupt you, because that's more important to me than because the sugar levels, blood sugar levels rising, especially in the United States where Coca-Cola has been around for much longer than much of the rest of the world. Type 2 diabetes is an epidemic on epidemic proportions, and much of it is contributed to the youth being indoctrinated to seeing soda as a viable source for energy when really it's detrimental for blood sugar spikes, type 2 diabetes, and onset diabetes, obesity, childhood obesity. So I'm curious about those educational efforts and how you address those.
So first of all, let us understand, so what do you mean people, first of all, drinking a lot of drinks with sugar, containing sugar, or eating whatever contains a lot of sugar. Let alone confectionery, you name it. Starting from bread as well. It's a lot of sugar in bread. It's a lot of sugar in dairy. So sugar is everywhere. So it depends on how much you use daily. So this affects overall obesity, because from the soft drinks, only 2 to 5% that goes into kind of the whole range of products and the sugar usage that relates to overall daily consumption of sugar. To soft drinks, irrespective it's Coke, irrespective or other sparkling, or as well juices, because sometimes juices, they contain 2-3 times more sugar than it goes back to the sparkling. As well as when you mentioned diabetes, right?
And obesity, and specifically in children.
Obesity. First of all, we have responsible marketing policy. We don't market any product under 12 to children under 12. Because we do understand that child cannot decide how many bottles of Coke or another drink can he or she consume. So that's the responsibility of parent to communicate and to decide how much a child under 12 can consume. That's the first thing. And then globally, we have this responsible marketing. Even the brand should not be visible. That's one thing that we do. The second thing is, as I said, in terms of the obesity, it's always about moderation and how much sugar you can basically have per day. And it's not only obesity is because of the sugar; it's also because of the broadband and other things that you just use.
I know a few doctors that might disagree with you with regards to because moderation with regards to something as addictive as high glycemic index sugar is akin to cocaine addiction. So, and there are research studies about this. There are research studies about this on how
I find that hard.
No, that's I'm sorry. There actually is, and the same with gambling. Same with high glycemic index sugar.
But to a certain extent, what it comes down to, what it has to come down to, is personal responsibility and personal choices.
Well, I mean, on the side of an organization or on the side of a person.
No, but I mean, in terms of the choices, thank you very much. So. You have a basket that we prepared for you, and then we brought today for you to understand that Coca-Cola is a global brand and it's a total beverage company. What we have in our portfolio, we have, for all occasions and for all types of consumers, products that we offer. For example, for the same diabeticians, we have the zero or the light version, which contains aspartame. And then you know that aspartame is in all kinds of products for diabeticians, and it is actually the one that is most researched by WHO. So from health perspective, this is what we also have. And the front of package communication, this is something that is visible, and this is something that, you know, like if you read, then you will have the whole information.
There's something that I would love to
have
see,
a
which is a
question.
stevia.
Yes.
Is there such thing as a stevia Coca-Cola?
Absolutely.
There will be?
I mean,
Or
for
there is?
Armenian market, no, there is. There is a
stevia Coca-Cola?
absolutely. So
Really?
in many markets, we have
Hazva
also
is excited.
stevia.
I am, because
Yes.
this is new. This is new.
No, stevia. I mean, stevia is in many markets. We don't have it in Armenia yet.
We do. Yeah, we do.
No, I mean, this is
mass
not
market, I
something.
see.
It's not something that, because whatever we have in our portfolio, we produce here and we sell here.
I see.
There are also, you know, like small market for stevia and other types of the Coke, but these ones are imported.
So you support the local market with
we
what
always
sweeteners?
support, and on the top of that, so in terms of also our suppliers, what we did a couple of years ago in terms of also sugar production.
Mm-hmm.
So we invested more than $1.5 million in hot carbon treatment.
Dollars.
Yes, to be able to buy sugar from local supplier, to again pay that money, because most of the time the quality of the sugar is not most of that. In Armenia, there was no quality that we can use for Coke.
So you have to train them and to
so
to
not
build them
only
up.
training, it should also go to that hot carbon treatment to be able to have the quality of the sugar that is possible to use in Coke, and not
fantastic.
only in all the drinks. And that's why now even we used to import a lot of sugar. Now most of the sugar is bought by from a local supplier to
I'm
be able
excited by
also
this.
to again spend this money here.
I'm really excited by the stevia
Elina, John.
possibility. Stevia.
I
Here.
have no idea what stevia is.
Let's see. I mean,
I know what it is
It's
because
sweet.
I
It's a
started.
natural
sweeter.
sweetener.
It's a natural sweeter. From
doesn't-
stevia
that
is a herb kind of.
Oh, okay.
Elina John, I have a question for you. And before getting to it, I would like to mention that we have like 2 more minutes before we go for our music break and then advertisement break, and we need to say goodbye to you before I ask the question. And
Really?
yeah,
Time just flies by,
Time
doesn't
was
it?
really short. We shifted our music break from 35 because we hated to interrupt you. The information was so interesting. So my last question is, what is better for a woman, working with others in a big company like Coca-Cola, or launching her own business as a business lady?
I think one complements another, and a lot of things that you can learn from the corporate world, this is something that later on you can use for your own business. And most of the time, for example, I hear from different women that they are, you know, better off than they just, you know, go out of the office. They have their stability in terms of, you know, salary, you know, pay, and then they just, you know, comfortably enjoying their time with their families after work. In terms of your own business, all of us know it's 24/7 job. So to what
Right.
extent you are ready for that challenge, it's your choice.
What is better for you?
I'm quite well settled in the corporation, and I have a lot of learning, and I do believe there are gonna be more learning. As my future plan, maybe I used to have a startup in living art jewelry, and I think that's gonna be one of my passionate dreams that one day it might, you know,
Cool.
become a true reality.
Passion project.
We're pretty sure
Absolutely.
that it will come true, and we wish you good luck in all your career plans. Thank you once again for being in our studio, and thanks for all the treats that you brought along
Thank you,
with
my pleasure.
you. We will enjoy them during the week, or maybe more, because there's so much.
And later on, I'll invite you once we open the Coca-Cola Visitor Center in Armenia. So
Oh,
you
yes.
will
Yay.
get
I'm
exposed
Yeah.
to interactive reality platforms, and then you will have more opportunity to also, you know, cover
Great.
That's
all
being
your
designed by
clients.
Thank
a
you.
local architectural
Absolutely.
firm, right?
And not only international team and local architect store, I get.
Now we're gonna listen to Cola by Camel Fat. That's yeah.
All right, Camel
So
Fat.
a special song for you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, is your refrigerator running?
No, it doesn't have any legs.
some American jokes just don't work with foreigners.
And we're back in our studio saying bye-bye to our guest. We really enjoyed Elina in our studio, and we hope that she will come back here again. And now I'm gonna share some upcoming events for the week. So, are we ready?
I am so ready for the upcoming events right now. It is on and on and on.
So, let's start with Yerevan American Corner. Every Friday at 4 p.m., there is a debate club with Jim Daly to improve English language skills. This week's debate topic is social media killing creativity? So if you guys want to join, you can go ahead and visit americancorners.am for more information. Also, every Friday at 3 p.m., Yerevan American Corner's Reading Club invites you to participate in listening and speaking skills. This week, they will read an excerpt. I always have trouble with this.
Excerpt.
From I Need You, Master. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Master Steve.
Oh my God. Master. That is just, Master. I was waiting for some kind of statement to be made like that. I need you, Master.
Master.
Yes, Master.
Help me, Master. And they are going to discuss the key points of the story. So, and intermediate level of English is required for participation. Now let's see what we have for movies in English. At Yerevan Mall Kino Park, there is Avengers Endgame at 7:25 and 10:40 p.m. From April 27th through May 1st. And The Aftermath from April 27th through May 1st. You can see this movie at 6:35 p.m. Festivals. May 3rd and 4th, there is Wine Days in Yerevan on Sadian Street, and I'm really looking forward to it because it's going to be fun.
Wine.
Yeah, Wine Fest. Wine Days.
Wine.
Yeah.
Wine.
Whining days.
And wine again. Music. Monday, April 29th at 9 p.m. Vahaganai Rapetan Quintet at Mezzo Classic House Club. April 29th at 7:30 p.m. British The Swingles at Aram Khachaturian Concert Hall. April 30th at 7 p.m. a great piano player Gonzalo Rubalcaba's trio with a new music program at Aram Khachaturian Concert Hall. May 2nd at 9:30 p.m. Aram MP3 at Kami Club. Sunday, May 5th at 7 p.m. Classical Meets Jazz version 2 at Aram Khachaturian Concert Hall. May 1st at 8 p.m. Melodies pour Notre Dame concert at Opera and Ballet State Theatre Foyer. May 2nd at 7 p.m. La Traviata opera in 4 acts at Opera and Ballet Theatre. Now let's see what's happening in the clubs. Hugo Bar and Restaurant, which is also a music club, tonight, right now, from 8:30 p.m. DJ Ocean is playing. Tomorrow, 8:30 p.m., DJs Arnie Rock and Hike Solar. May 2nd at 30 p.m. again, DJ Smooth Music. And May 4th, 8:30 p.m. DJ Beatman. So if you guys want to enjoy some DJ stuff, go ahead and visit Hugo Bar and Restaurant. May 4th at 7:30, there is Masquerade Art Party at Hydenique Cinema, which is art expo, illusionist show, live band performing, dance show, drinks and food and more. So make sure you purchase the tickets beforehand.
It's a multi-dimensional party. Mm-hmm. It's got everything.
Yeah, it's got everything. Theaters, I'd like to mention that April 30th till May 4th, there is launching of an international theater festival, Armono, which invites us to enjoy new performances at different theaters around Yerevan.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. And actually, the first performance will be on April 30th at 7:30 p.m. Johann Wolfgang Goethe, Faust, The Ritual at Stage Puppet Theater. The performance goes beyond the traditional theater. It is a synthesis of physical and dramatic theaters. So this is going to be something special.
That sounds
very
really
erotic.
interesting.
Sounds erotic.
Or neurotic or something. Ick.
Oh, whoa, that's a great
An
combination of
alternative-
neuroses and erotic.
An alternative
Neurotic.
reality and mysteries of subconscious. This is how they describe it. So it's pretty intriguing. Yeah. And we're done with the events for now. And we enjoyed tonight, kind of intense.
Yeah, and I just want to, Elina Markaryan was a great guest, and I really feel like she brought out kind of the human face of this multinational corporation. Like I was talking about earlier with Adam Smith and the idea that an economic actor, a person, and you were joking earlier, a corporation in the U.S. is considered a legal person,
It
right?
is actually
A person that just acts according to numbers, profit, dollar amounts. I don't think Adam Smith would consider that a human being.
Many human beings do that.
They
though.
have, and that's why I would say, a lot of humans out there today are not human beings according to a Smithian definition.
I'm a corporation. Nice to meet you.
But I mean, she brought out the other interests of this multinational corporation: recycling, education, water resources, helping local industries, local competition, and
that's
things
great.
like that. Yeah.
And we need to learn more about this.
Yeah, and it, it goes to show you that globalization has its positives and negatives. And one of the positives in this case is that all of this money that Coca-Cola is able to make is used to do positive things.
And I hope that all other big companies will take an
be
example.
companies with a conscience, be companies that are human beings in a Smithian way.
A nice sum up for our show. Thank you guys for being with us tonight.
Thank you
with
all.
Hazva QT, Master Steve, and
Ina
myself.
MK.
We enjoyed it as always, and we'll be looking forward to join Radio Van next Saturday.
Keep it real.
Keep it real. Have a great
rest
end
of your
the
weekend. And a great week. We'll catch you next Saturday at 7 o'clock on the Great American Weekend.